Hi, everyone, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you so much for being with me tonight as our normal Monday shows recommence after the little break we've had. A warm welcome thank you to those who came along to London to the live show. There seems a long time ago now, but it was only Friday week. Thanks for that, and to those that I saw in London in Trafalgar Square on the following Saturday. Appreciate all of you guys and all the kind things that were said. So yes, I see bang on cue, Mr. Chris Davies, a great supporter who was there on both occasions. Yeah, a thank you to Chris and to everyone else. Appreciate that. Now we've got that done, we can concentrate more on this. And there's lots of news happening now. A couple of things. First of all, there's obviously massive breaking news in the UK concerning the events of the past 72 hours. I've tried to put out as much of that stuff concerning all the kind of the rioting, the protesting, the response of the government. It's all over on my social media feeds if you want to get it. It's over on my Substacks, and it's over on my podcast as well. So I'm trying to put out and keep as much information out there as possible, and this relates to the topic we're going to talk about in a second as well, but trying to get truth out there at a time when the mainstream media acts as a filter to stop us getting truth is, there's my most recent Substack, which speculates on the direction we're going. You have a read of it, just go over, click the link, and you can check stuff out over there. But anyway, lots of content for you guys. Hope. Hello, by the way, hello to Donny Girl all the way from Hawaii, Oahu. Yes, aloha to you as well. Thanks for being with us. We're going to talk about stuff which relates to the States, but it relates to the world actually in a second. So we're going to go through all of that. But just before we bring our guest on, I just want to play or ad from our sponsor, quantumhypno.co.uk. Check out the link, play the ad, and then our guest will join us. Go.
I am here to bring light. It's about healing. Mind, body, soul. Don't ever settle. Find your purpose. Find the answers. Don't hold back. Achieve maximum success. Book with me if you want to live.
There you go, Quantum Hypno. Do check it out. Right. Okay. So one of the big issues that we all face wherever we are in the world at the moment is the whole net zero, the demise of the internal combustion engine, because we're all going to be driving electric cars. Yeah, all of that sort of stuff, all that malarkey. So we got a great guest to come on to talk about that. So our special guest who's coming on, he's a geologist. He is the executive director of the CO2 Coalition, which gives us all the good news about CO2, and he's the author of a couple of essential reads on the topic. So without any further ado, please welcome Gregory Wrightstone. Hi, Gregory.
Oh, good to be on with you. There's, as usual, there's so much to talk about when we talk about climate change. And isn't it affecting nearly every aspect of our society today?
Yeah.
It's incredible. Well, as we get into this, you're gonna learn some things you haven't heard. You might think you're pretty knowledgeable about this, but all hopefully you're gonna be going, huh, isn't that interesting? I didn't know that. And so that's my goal here, is to provide you the facts, the science, and the data that disputes this notion of a climate crisis.
Well, I agree, Gregory, and I'm sure we will learn stuff from you because one of the fundamental points is that we live at a time when proper science and proper information is actually being, to a significant degree, filtered away from the population by governments, by the mainstream media, who follow a particular narrative, and we all know what the narrative is. Let's start off with the narrative, shall we? And the narrative is, listen, the earth is going to plunge into global boiling if we don't go about change our direction, essentially remove the stuff that's kept society going for a couple of hundred years. If we only do that, then that will save the world, right? So do you agree with that, Gregory? And if not, why not?
Oh, no, 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 I do. It's they need to silence people like me and my colleagues at the CO2 Coalition because we tell a compelling, fact-based, science-based narrative of, frankly, the benefits of modest warming and more CO2. And that's the gist of my new book. My first book was Inconvenient Facts, where
Yep.
we bared and put the information out there that showed there is no climate crisis. But
Yep.
we've moved on a little bit from that, actually a lot, and gone beyond that there is no climate crisis, and there isn't. But what we find, and what I find and portray in my book and document, is that by almost every metric you look at, Earth's ecosystems are thriving and prospering, and humanity is benefiting from modest warming and more CO2. It's completely opposite of what you're being told. What's going bad? They're making up stuff. I mean,
Mm.
every single thing that's odd, they blame CO2 driven global warming, and
Yeah.
they paint every time it's hot as being just terrible. Look how hot it is here, and but they never talk. Just one good example, if you give me a minute, is I just returned from the Netherlands. I was there about a month ago,
Yeah.
and they said, "Come on over to Holland. It's beautiful here in June." I showed up and I had to wear a winter coat every single day. Now, bear in mind, the American news at the same time I was wearing a winter coat in the Netherlands, they were talking about this unusual and unprecedented heating in Europe. And I said, wait a minute, I'm in Europe and
Yep.
I'm wearing a winter coat in June. And they were talking, yeah, it was hot. And I believe it was Spain and Italy. But they don't talk about where it's really cold. That's the
No.
selective reporting that we get.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I think we're all being gaslit, Gregory, because here in the UK, just like in Holland, we keep being told, oh, it's the hottest May, the hottest June, the hottest July. And basically, yeah, I've worn winter clothes just like you in the last couple of months. So what we're being told is so far removed from reality. But how can they do this? How do they get away with portraying this, boiling climate, which is completely discordant with, well, what we actually experience with our
Oh,
own eyes?
yeah, I can explain that very easily. They get away with it because they complete censorship and control of the media. They have complete censorship of who can speak and who cannot speak.
Mm.
And what they're doing is they're relying on this what they're calling the consensus opinion, which
Yeah.
is entirely false. Michael Crichton, the famous
Yep.
author, he famously said, if it's consensus, it's not climate. If it's climate, or excuse me, if it's consensus, it's not science. And if
Yeah.
it's science, it's not consensus. Richard Feynman, the noted physicist, he said, I'd rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned. And that's what we have right now. We have an answer. They provided the answer to us, but you dare not question it. And so we need to be silenced. And because we have the overwhelming evidence of what I'm talking about, of hugely increases of vegetation, crop growth breaking records in almost every category year after year after year, and the humanity benefiting from this crop growth. And that's probably the most important aspect that we see of this warming and more CO2 is just the crop production records are growing faster than our population. That's a very good thing. We should celebrate that.
Absolutely, and that means so much for example, places like the African continent, where the land is more productive. The crops are more productive. Parts of the Sahara, I think parts of the
The
Sahara,
Sahel,
yeah,
the
have got,
Sahel.
yeah. So it's so weird that in a way things have never been better, but we're being told they've never been worse. And CO2, of course, is the demon. It's the bad guy. It's what we definitely need to reduce it, don't we? Except
Yeah,
we don't.
it's called the demon. They call it the demon molecule. We call it the miracle molecule. Our unofficial motto here at the CO2 Coalition is "We love CO2, and so should you." And we're just of course the CO2 Coalition. That's our
Yeah,
we're out there promoting because that's everything that they're trying to do with net zero. The reason they want you to drive an electric car that might combust spontaneously, the
yeah,
reason they want you to put heat pumps in your home, all of this is driven because of this aversion and fear of too much CO2 in the atmosphere. The fact of the matter is, let's get right to the point here when we talk about CO2. We are today at around, I'm not going to give you a lot of numbers, but we're at 420 plus or minus
yeah,
parts per million.
yeah.
And at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, we were at 280, 420 today, 280 then. That's a 50% increase over the last several hundred years.
Mhm.
Well, that sounds like a lot, but not when we put it in the big perspective. If you look in the perspective throughout Earth's history, it's been average 2,600 parts per million, 6.5 times what we are today. We are at near historically low levels for
Yeah,
CO2. And so we're actually CO2 impoverished. We're in a CO2 famine. We don't have too much CO2. We don't have enough. And we talk about vegetation and plants. I mean, plants don't have a voice in this matter, but if they did, they'd be waving their little plant arms and going,
yeah.
"I want more CO2. Please give us more CO2," because they're craving it.
That's right.
Yeah, and it's a huge, so easily proved story.
Yeah, I mean, anybody who, for example, grows vegetables at home understands the importance of a hothouse where you have an increased concentration of CO2 and it produces, great plants. So, as you said, they've played the trick of taking that figure from the end of the mini ice age. Which am I right in thinking, Gregory? Like, had it gone much below that, we could have faced essentially an extinction event because
Yeah,
too little CO2 is the end of life.
Yeah, near the end of the last glacial advance, and I'm not going to call it an ice age because we are still, believe it or not, we are
Mm,
currently in an ice age. We're
mhm.
just in an interglacial period.
Yeah,
So about 18,000 years ago, 15, 18,000 years ago, CO2 levels got down to the dangerously low level of 182 parts per million. And why is it dangerously low? Because at 150 parts per million, uh, plant life cannot survive.
mm,
And actually higher elevation areas at that
mm,
really low back then
yeah,
actually were devoid of plants because as you go higher, there's less
yeah,
CO2 to be used. So these higher altitude areas were actually devoid of vegetation, and because of because of that, windstorms blew the dust, and we can see that increased dust in the glacial cores, the ice cores that we get from Greenland and Antarctic. We can see that additional dust, and so we nearly crossed that what I call the line of death. We
yeah,
nearly got there, and so this uh, CO2 that we're liberating from coal and oil and gas are are now bringing us up to better levels. They're still suboptimal for plant growth, but
mm,
it's a lot better than what it
mm,
had been. And what's interesting too, I'm calling in my new book, I call coal, fossil fuels, coal, oil, and gas.
yeah,
I call them nature's solar batteries because think
yeah,
about it.
yeah,
You know what coal was formed from? Trees and vegetation,
yeah,
which were fueled by photosynthesis, and they sucked carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and fell and became coal beds. Same with oil and gas, fueled by
mm,
algal blooms, which also were fueled by photosynthesis. So the
mhm,
sun was powering the oil and gas source rocks. It powered the trees, and what we're doing now is liberating that carbon dioxide that was locked up in carbon in coal, oil, and gas, we're now liberating, that's been stored now for millions of years, just waiting for us to come get it. And that's what we're doing.
Yeah, yeah, but then the political class want to stop us using the hydrocarbon, the nature's natural solar. They want to stop all of that, which they believe will reduce CO2. So it's a false aim, isn't it? Well, I mean, the objective they're trying to achieve, it's fundamentally fraudulent. We need to be basically using more CO2, do we not? If you follow your own logic.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, everything we're doing to reduce it. Now, just last week, Janet Yellen here in the United States, U.S. Treasury
Yeah,
Secretary,
yeah,
she was in Brazil and down there. She said it would cost $78 trillion by 2050 to reach their net zero goal. 78 trillion. She thought that was a pretty good investment. You know what I say? It's we're there. It's a solution in search of a problem.
yeah,
There is no climate crisis. No, we shouldn't spend 78 trillion. No, we shouldn't spend 780 pounds. We shouldn't spend one red penny should not be spent to solve a non-existent crisis. But
yeah.
they've got everybody convinced that it has to be done. It's
Mm.
I just shake my head and you just wonder what is, I'm always asked almost every interview, and you were about to ask me, why are they doing it?
Yeah. Why are they doing it? Yeah, yeah,
Well, I will say to you, David, you and every single one of your viewers right now are just as qualified as I am to say why they're doing it. Is it bringing down capitalism? Is it destruction of the Western society? Is it elevate? Is it control? Is it funding? Is it money? I don't know. You're, like I say, you are just as qualified as I am. As a scientist,
yeah.
my job is to say, okay, this is what they're telling you, and here are what the science, the facts, and the data tell us, and it's invariably disputing what they're trying. They're blowing smoke, is what they're doing.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Gregory. I think, by the way, it's all of the above regarding the list of things. But for me, it's the sheer nihilism of what they want. Like we talked about the fact that you know, Kamala Harris, who's got probably a 50% chance mathematically of becoming the next president. I mean, she's talked openly about the internal combustion engine essentially being gone by 2035. And I was telling you before we came on air about, I was out for dinner on Saturday night with some family friends of mine from South Dakota. And we got talking about the whole issue of electric cars and all of that. And they just said, look, just no chance. If this was sort of to be made mandatory, that would bring an end to life in places like that. And you'll be familiar, Gregory, with the United States essentially built on the automobile, the gas-powered engine, and so is there any way that they can achieve this aim without destroying everything? What do you think?
You want one word answer? It's no. It's no, and hell no, it's not.
Elaborate.
They can't do it. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous. They can try. They'll waste a lot of money doing it,
Mm.
and they'll run up energy and electricity prices for us. But that's their goal. They admit that they want to
Mm.
impose a carbon tax. They admit that they want us to go to electric and solar, or wind and solar,
Yeah.
get away from the affordable. And there are three words that I want to stress here when we talk about electricity generation. There are three things we should consider. It should be reliable, abundant, and affordable. Abundant, reliable, and affordable, those three words. You know what? President Xi in China, he gets
Mm.
it. He understands.
Yep.
Prime Minister Modi in India,
Totally.
he gets
Yep.
it. He understands that if you want a vibrant, growing, robust economy, you need reliable, abundant, affordable energy and
Yep.
electricity. And they are going gung ho, mining as much coal as they can and building as many coal-fired
Yep.
plants as they can. And the words are coming out of their lips. We're going to go net zero by, you name the date.
Yeah.
No,
But
no,
no,
no.
no. No,
And
this is what worry. It's curious, isn't it? So you're quite right, Gregory. China, India, those massive economies may may mouth the platitudes, but the reality is they're building the gas powered uh, power generation and all of that. There, but the West is like completely divorced from that. And here in the UK, I mean, we've just got a new government in, which is causing all kinds of problems, but they're absolutely committed to the ending of the internal combustion engine by 2030. That's 6 years. And by that point, the entire grid has to be free of hydrocarbon. And that's not achievable in any way, but that's where they are. So you got to wonder, Gregory, about, how do they go with it? It perplexes me enormously. They must realize, and this brings me back to the States, if the US does go down this road, I mean, you're in trouble. You're in massive, and then the world's in trouble because you're in trouble.
yeah, if you look at what the Biden-Harris administration has done, of course,
Mm,
the first day in office, they killed the XL pipeline that would have
yep.
brought vast oil reserves from the tar sands of Canada into the United States. They killed it. They put off killed leasing in the Gulf of Mexico. There are two large
Mm,
parts of America that are oil productive with vast quantities: the Gulf of Mexico offshore and Alaska. They're controlled by the federal government. The United States is unique in the world in
mm,
that the
mhm,
surface owner also owns their minerals, their oil and gas rights, their coal rights beneath their property to the center of the earth. And nowhere else, I don't believe, on earth do they have this. And so most of the huge reserves America is now the largest natural gas and oil producer in the world is because of we're tapping these shale, mudstone, organic rich source
mhm,
rocks and
mhm,
using horizontal drilling and fracking. And the good news for America in the world probably is that almost all of it's really close to 100% of all of it is happening on privately held properties. So it becomes, instead of them flipping a switch and saying no more drilling, they can't do that when it's in privately held property. And
yeah,
so that's
yeah,
enabled us to keep up the production despite their best efforts to do that.
mm,
And again, Alaska is huge, untapped reserves, and they're putting it off limits.
yeah,
Just let me go into this Alaska. It's important.
yeah.
You remember Prudhoe Bay? Um, you may be. Oh, you're a young man. You don't go back that far.
Not
But
that young.
Prudhoe Bay but Prudhoe Bay was a vast oil field that was being developed, and they needed to build the Trans-Alaska pipeline system, TAPS, to get it from Alaska down through Canada to the United States. And they did that in a gargantuan effort. And it's producing, but it's declining, and they need more oil to keep it up, keep the economic vitality, because the less oil moves through there. Think about it. You got to
Mm,
have as that oil gets cold, it becomes more viscous and harder to
yeah.
move. And there's the economic limit is somewhere we're working on a paper, and maybe it's 300,000 barrels a day. I think
Mm,
we're at 500,000 and dropping now. But
mm.
it's sooner or later when we reach that economic limit, it will have to be closed down. And when that time comes, it's going to strand just vast quantities of untapped oil reserves up in the Alaska wilderness.
That sounds so criminal that you've got that, and it's going to be essentially useless.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you something else that sounds criminal. I'm a geologist, and I was a co-author of the first peer-reviewed comprehensive paper on what's called the
Yes.
Marcellus Shale of the eastern United States. It's the largest natural gas field in the world by far. Just quickly, it's so big. When we were working on this, we looked the top 10 natural gas fields in the world combined did not
Mhm.
equal the Marcellus Shale. That's big.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
They've got this vast quantity of natural gas, and it's in Pennsylvania, but in New England, northeasternmost United States,
Yeah.
needs natural gas badly. Between Pennsylvania and New England are the states of New Jersey and New York that have both banned pipelines. And so they've got this gigantic, enormous reserve of generations of natural gas but they can't get it to New England where it's needed. And it gets worse. And I'll tell you why. Because in America, we have what's called the Jones Act. And the Jones Act says if you transport one commodity from one American port to another, it has to be on an American flag tanker. Well, there are no liquefied natural gas American flag tankers. So they can't take Texas gas to Boston in New England. They have to buy natural gas at 5 times the cost from Saudi Arabia and Algeria. And but it's mind-boggling. Joe Biden could issue a waiver this afternoon and get around that. And they could be importing gas from Louisiana, Texas, up into Boston at 20% of the cost. You just go, what are they?
Yeah.
These people, it's just incredible.
Yeah, because I mean, ultimately, it's the economy, stupid, isn't it? I mean, ultimately, the consequences of this rush to net zero, I think, Gregory, I don't know if you agree, but I think it's almost like a rush to deindustrialization, because I can't see how these so-called renewable sources like wind power and solar, I don't see how our modern societies can operate in anything like what we have at the moment with that as the primary driver. Do you?
No, not at all. And there's just so many things we could talk about here. When you talk about, let's just say when we talk about wind and solar, I exposed the lie of the great mass extinction that's occurring. It's not. But we looked at this, and there was a UN report that claimed that extinctions were going to be at a 5-fold increase, and there were going to be 25,000 to 30,000 extinctions over the next several decades.
Yeah.
That would require 2,000 extinctions per year. And so I looked at it, and I looked at the same data they did. Well, it's been declining. Extinctions have been declining for the last 90, 100 years, and it's insignificantly. But the one thing they had right in that report in the UN was that the greatest threat to endangered species was a loss of habitat. Okay, I agree with that. You probably do, and too. And so, what's their solution for solving climate change? Destroy the habitat. Pave over grasslands, pave over pastures, put up solar panel, don't call them farms, industrial scale facilities. Cut down mature forests and either turn them into pellets to be burned at tracks or DRAX rather, or cut them down and put up industrial scale wind turbine facilities. So they want to destroy the habitat. It's almost like they want to destroy the environment in order to save the environment.
I completely agree. I find it so bizarre that the so-called environmentalists are the people who are destroying the environment. Where I live here, I live in Northern Ireland, the northern part of the Irish island, and there's some lovely scenery we have, Gregory, mountainous scenery. It's all being defaced by these things which I call eco crucifixes, the wind turbines, which chop up the birds, which do not provide any sustainable form of energy, really. And yet this, and the next thing is, because our climate's a bit different to yours, the solar factories, and you're right, don't call them solar farms, because farms suggests positivity. There's nothing positive about them, is there? I mean, I worry about productive farmland being turned into solar factories, and I know there's plans to do that here in the UK as well. It's very disturbing, Gregory.
It is, and here in the United States, they've even our national symbol, the bald eagle. They are if you have a bald eagle feather, you're liable for thousands of dollars of fines. If you kill a bald eagle, you're going to go to jail for a while and pay a huge fine. But they're permitted in the United States to kill 15,000 plus bald eagles a year. That's in their permits, and they just, that's the cost of achieving net zero, and then we'll just. And what we hear in the United States is, people say, but birds kill a lot more. Birds kill a lot more, or excuse me, cats kill a lot more birds than what. Right. Well, they're not. Your cat's not killing a golden eagle, if you have a cat. If it's a cat that can kill a golden eagle.
Yeah.
I keep that damn cat away from the grandkids. All right. I'm not going to put that anywhere near, don't let the
Yeah.
kids kill that cat.
Yeah.
And it's these big ones that they're killing. It's not little
Yeah.
sparrows or robins. And
Yeah.
you get that. It's crazy. Uh,
Yeah.
we don't have to talk about the pollution that's involved with these.
Yep.
But one of the things too, if we can just let me hop to a different subject, if I
Yep.
can. We're being told that about sea level rise, aren't we? And
Yeah.
that all these islands around the world are going to be underwater by 2050 or whatever. And they're all of the prime ministers and presidents are standing there with their hand out looking
Yeah.
for climate reparations. My people will be
Yeah.
dead in the water.
Yeah.
Okay, well, according to the UN, you're going to find this fascinating. According to the UN, the most at-risk island nation and chain of islands really are the Maldives in the Indian
Indeed. Yep.
Ocean.
Yep.
And so the highest point I think is 14 feet. And so it's just above sea level. Well, get this. 15,000 years ago, the Maldives were also just above sea level. And in the last 15,000 years, sea level has risen 400 feet. Well, you might ask me, well, Greg,
Hmm.
how can that be? Why are the Maldives not under 400 feet of water?
Hmm.
Good question.
Yeah.
It's a geologic process known as accretion. It's these islands actually grow as sea level rises. You've never heard this, I'll bet. You're looking at me going, what?
Yeah.
It's
This is new. This is new. Keep going. Yeah.
And if you don't believe me, Google island accretion and you can learn. And so during storm events, uh, it washes the nearshore gravels and sands
Yeah.
up and in a lot of the hurricanes, they bust up the corals during these big events, but it's washed up onto the island. And then that gravel and everything's distributed by the critters there and they're
Yeah.
moving crabs and everything's moving it around. But it's a slow process. But geology is a slow process. We
Hmm.
know it's occurring. We know the sea level has risen 400 feet. Now, the Maldives by 2050, it will just suffer, mind you, an inordinate amount of sea level rise of, I hope you are sitting down. Okay.
I'm
2 inches.
I'm sitting comfortably. Yeah. Yeah.
2 inches. I'm not going to translate to centimeters for you, but they're going to see 2 inches of sea level rise. So what they're telling you is the last 15,000 years and 400 feet of sea level rise didn't put the Maldives underwater, but that next 2 inches, look out, they're going to be underwater. And the other thing to think about, if you Google Forbes in the Maldives, and you can find where they're building, there's a building boom going on. There's
Hmm.
some, I think,
Hmm.
12 or 14 resort complexes that are being built in the Maldives and 3 airports. Now, these facilities, millions of dollars of development are occurring, funded by equity companies and insured by multinational insurance companies. Insurance companies avoid
Yeah.
risk like
Yep.
the plague.
Yep.
Or are these insurance companies going to insure millions of dollars on the Maldives only to have them be underwater in a few years? Heck no. They know just as well as I know, and now you know,
Hmm.
it's not going to happen. It
Hmm.
hasn't happened in 15,000 years, and it ain't going to happen in the next 50 or 100.
But
So there.
yeah, well, that's interesting. The process, I didn't understand the process, but I mean, I look upon it as a grift that the governments of the Maldives and some of, I think it's a Tuvalu, that's another one. They just grift away to get the all the, as you say, the climate reparations, which they shouldn't be given a penny. But even if you look at some of take it back to the States, and you take people like Obama and some of the other elite, they have bought their sort of beachfront mansions, haven't they? They mustn't
They
be
do.
expecting any change, any
Yeah.
rising anytime soon.
Yeah. Small carbon footprint for thee, but not for me.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
yeah,
Yeah.
they fly their private jets all over. Uh, in fact, I just had a private jet that I was able to take to Billings, Montana recently.
All right. Yeah.
And it was quite the ride, where it felt quite sinful, but it added to my large carbon footprint. And you know what? I'm proud of
Should
my
be
large
proud.
carbon footprint.
Yeah.
I have 2 SUVs. I heat my home in the winter with natural gas.
Hmm.
I cool it. I'm in Florida. We cool it and we keep it comfortably cool using mostly coal-fired electricity. We eat meat. And so and we know that my carbon footprint is benefiting the earth by benefiting vegetation and crop growth.
We've got some. I can see one of our regulars here, who's a lady living in out in Hawaii, in one of the Hawaiian Islands. She's talking about the fact that the wind turbines, the ones, I think the ones at sea, they're also, yeah. I mean, what happens to these turbines when they cease to have their shelf life? Similarly, the solar panels. What's happening to the likes of the whales? That, for example, because of the noises that and the dangers in these offshore wind turbine factories as well. I mean, this is all anti-environmentalism, Gregor.
Let's look at what's going to happen to all these wind turbines and solar
Yeah.
panels at the end of their life cycle.
Yep.
I don't. Neither do they. They don't address it. That's not part of the plan. They're not looking that far ahead. It's going to be massive. And these wind turbines, the turbines themselves are degraded pretty shortly after, within a few years,
Yeah.
they're running into, I mean, they're chopping up insects and they're just being degraded, their ability to turn. And the solar panels, of course, a couple good hailstorms can put out an entire industrial scale solar facility. I don't know what's going to happen with them. We're just not. It's going to be huge amount of waste that'll need to be buried in landfills. But you can't do the solar panels because it's toxic. You can't recycle them. The answer is I don't know what they're going to do, and they don't know either. It's awful.
It's amazing, as you say. So all this massive infrastructure being put in place, and no idea what happens when it reaches the end of its life. But then I suppose you could say the same with electric cars, with these batteries, these cobalt and whatever else they have got in them. I mean, how do they dispose of them? What does that do to the environment?
And if you look at it too, there's no used car market for EVs. Well, there is, but the value of a used EV,
yeah,
we've got a person well involved with the business, and who will remain nameless, but he says you're lucky if you get 20% a year after you buy it, 20% of the list price of that purchase, because people don't. You're getting. It's such a danger because you've got the electric battery that needs to be replaced, and you might have spent $70,000 or $80,000 or more, but it's going to cost you $25,000 or $28,000 to replace that battery. And one of the big problems we have with these electric cars are the batteries are right underneath. So if you happen to run up on a curb or it's very easy to damage these, and then they need replaced. Or there was just a fire on the highway going to Las Vegas last week, about a week and a half ago. It closed the highway for 2 days, and it was still burned. They were able to bulldoze it to the side. 5 days after it caught fire, it was an electric truck. It was still burning after 5 days. There was another in Korea just 2 days ago that caught fire in an underground parking garage. A case like that could be horrific. It ended up, it was 2 days, but it also ignited 100 other cars were in that underground facility. Yeah, these things are dangerous. And the electric school buses, if you go back to Kamala Harris, 2 years ago, she rolled out a plan for $2 billion investment for electric school buses. And we all know, if you know Kamala Harris, she loves yellow school buses, and she'll go on and on about yellow school buses and how much she loves. And so far they had planned to roll out 2,500 be purchased by now. So far it's been 60, and that's because these school buses, bear in mind, the average school bus costs in the order of $120,000. They're not cheap, $120,000 per bus. These are $350,000 to $500,000 per bus. Not only that, the first ones that were bought were just plagued with mechanical problems. They weren't being used. repairs were extraordinarily expensive, and the charging stations were another $40,000 or $50,000. And so the school administrators just don't want to touch these things. The other thing is,
Yeah.
if you've got children or grandchildren riding a school bus, it's an electric bus. The battery is right underneath where the children are sitting. These
Yeah.
things, it's a rare event, but these things we just saw in Las Vegas with that fire.
Yep.
These things ignite. What happens when you've got 40 children, excuse me, sitting on a bus, and what happens with them if
Yeah.
it ignites? They're all in terrible danger.
Yeah, it's very scary. I saw a video. I think it might have been in France. It may have been in Paris, where one of these electric buses caught fire, but it was parked beside a couple of other ones. And very quickly, Gregory, the whole thing, it was an inferno.
Yep.
And it's not just like an ordinary fire, because the fire brigade can't deal with this. The fire services cannot deal with these electric fires in the same way as if it was an ordinary fire. And so it's kind of horrific. And as you say, when you have school buses with school kids, young kids in them, it's horrific to think what
Yeah,
might
I
happen.
think what's going to happen when it occurs in an underground parking garage beneath an office building or an apartment building with
Mm,
thousands of people,
mm.
it would look like 9/11 with those buildings. It's horrific what may occur. And I just shake my head at, they just don't recognize dangers that are right in
Danger.
front of their face.
Yeah.
I,
In fact, I'll tell you, Gregory, I was through an airport last week. And at the particular airport I was driving through, there was a multi-story car park, and a hybrid an SUV hybrid had caught fire, and such was the ferocity of the fire. Virtually every car on 3 or 4 stories was burnt. It's unbelievable, like something out of a movie, like an apocalypse movie, and that was just caused by one vehicle basically igniting and taking down hundreds with it. And that's a well-known
exactly.
UK airport. So it is, as you say, it's scary, the stuff that could happen if this technology spreads.
And why are they doing it?
Hmm.
Because they're demonized, because they don't want anybody producing any additional CO2 from fossil fuels. It
No.
all goes back to carbon dioxide, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Why are they going electric? Carbon dioxide, bad. Electric, good. And it's also, we haven't talked about it, but it's also this aversion. They're telling us, fear the heat, fear the heat. Heat is bad. Warming is bad. It'll lead to droughts,
Yeah.
agricultural collapse.
Yeah.
And in my new book, I have an entire section. The middle section of my book is devoted to I think it's a fascinating subject, the relationship between human history and climate history. And we find that as temperature and CO2 march hand in hand with humanity and the human
Yeah.
condition, we find that over the last several thousand years, if we look back to the first great civilizations, the Babylonians, the Hittites,
Yep.
the Assyrians, the Harappan Empire in the Indus River Valley, all of
Yes.
these great civilizations these were the first great civilizations, and they rose up during a period called the Minoan Warm Period, the Bronze Age. They all prospered, life was good, food was bountiful,
Yeah.
and then it started getting cold, and
Mm.
it got cold quickly. And this was repeated time and time again. As it got cold, we had crop failure, famine, pestilence, and mass depopulation. And that was followed by 500 years. It was called the Greek Dark Ages. It was just horrific.
Mm. Yeah.
And we don't
Yeah.
know much about that period, but if you just Google late Bronze Age collapse, you can say, you don't have to believe me, but you can go search for it. It's a fact. And again, the Roman warm period, life was good, food was bountiful. It was a lot warmer there in the warm period than what it is today. They were growing citrus in the north of England near Hadrian's Wall.
That's right.
You can't do that today.
No, you
And
can't. No. But
some people do. Actually, I've had people push back. Well, my neighbor, or my uncle grows lemons. Yeah, he's got them in a bucket, and he puts it out in the summer for 3 months, and he puts it in the moves it
Shit's
inside
outside.
for the winter.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
yeah,
could do it, but you're not. And so we had that, and then it started getting cold. We had the dark ages,
yeah.
medieval warm period. Again, life is good. And then we went into what was called the Little Ice Age, which was recent, 500
We,
years
which from what I understand, Gregory, there are people out there in the what I would call the alarmist, the environmental alarmist community, who even would deny the little ice age. They would deny because it doesn't work for their charts and the way they're trying to graph things, doesn't it? It's very awkward for them. The fact that, for example, there's recorded history here in the UK when the River Thames froze over and they were able to have Shakespeare writes about stuff like that in the 16 1700s, but so we know that we emerged from a mini ice age, so naturally it's going to be warmer now. I mean,
ago.
who's
Yeah, thank
surprised about
God.
it?
Thankfully, it's been warming for
Yeah,
more than
thankfully,
200
yeah,
years.
yeah,
And
yeah.
this was probably the coldest part of the last 10,000 years, and we're thankfully coming out of that. The worst of the cold, and we have an example. I'm talking to you from Arlington, Virginia, just south of us.
Mhm.
George and Martha Washington lived at Mount Vernon, and he built. Martha Washington liked to have ice in her drinks in the summer, and so George built her an ice house, and they would have the enslaved people go down to the Potomac River and cut the thick ice in the wintertime with their saws, and they would take big blocks of ice and bring it up to the ice house, and Martha
Yeah.
would have summer drinks, ice. You can't, the Potomac doesn't freeze over anymore. It just doesn't. It just,
No,
I think 25 years ago we had a good, it froze over, but nothing like that. So we can use historical records like that, like you said,
mm,
with the ice fairs on the Thames and other
Thames,
things
yeah.
to say, of course it was colder.
Yeah,
But people,
but Gregory, do you not remember back in the 1970s, we were all told that the ice age was upon us. We were all going to freeze to death. I remember when I was a lot younger, almost being terrorized by that when I was very young and impressionable. And yet we've gone from that when that failed to the next scam.
yeah, well, this is a teaching moment here for me. So it we started really ramping up atmospheric CO2 in that post World War II economic boom. It was in the mid 20th century is when we really started ramping it up. And just as we started adding CO2 to the atmosphere, we went into a 33-year cooling period that you're just referencing. So just as we're adding CO2, it cools. And it went through cooling until the late 70s, and then it started warming back again. Well, how can this be? We're being told that CO2 is driving temperature. How could it be that just as we started adding more CO2, we went into this cooling? And you're right. I went to school in the 70s, and in geology, it looked pretty clear. We could be going into the next ice age because all we could see was in hindsight was 33 years of cooling, and we couldn't see in the future
Hmm,
that it would start warming again. And
hmm.
so if you were parked back in 1978, I remember at Waynesburg College, it was brutally cold. That was the very end of it. It was horrifically cold for 2 winters, and then it
Yeah,
started warming up. And I
yeah.
like the warmth.
Yeah, because but everything's cyclical, isn't it? I mean, the nature of this planet is cyclical, and so it's like the alarmists seem to want to deny the very nature of our planet, Gregory, which is really really irksome, to put it mildly.
Well, they've got to ignore a lot. Let's just put it that way. And
Mm,
they're
mm.
doing it very well. They're silencing us. And my colleagues at the CO2 Coalition, for example, you talked about environmentalists. We've got Dr. Patrick Moore is on our board of directors. He was a co-founder of Greenpeace, and he left them.
Yes,
He
Patrick.
believes
Yep, yep.
Pat, wonderful interview. You should, if you haven't, you need to talk to him. We just brought John Clauser, Dr. John Clauser, onto our board. He's the 2022 Nobel laureate in physics. It's hard to call him a science denier, but they do. We've got, I mean, just some uh,
Yeah.
top scientists and experts in the world are part of the CO2 coalition. I'm so proud to lead this
Mm,
group. We're doing papers, publishing, and if I just our basic what we believe is that is it warming? Yes, that warming started more than 300 years ago. Is CO2 increasing? Absolutely and thankfully. What causes the CO2 to increase? It's mainly our burning of
mhm,
fossil fuels.
mhm,
And so is CO2 causing warming? We will also say yes, but not very much. Of course, CO2 is a greenhouse gas, and the more of it, the more warming we get. The problem there is it's just
mm,
so small compared to the natural forces. And also CO2 with the increasing, it's what we call saturated in the atmosphere, that there's only so much infrared radiation to excite those carbon dioxide molecules because of the saturation, because the levels are getting high. So any additional CO2 has less warming.
I mean, at this, as we're talking about this tonight, Gregory, over in Italy, I think it is. I think it's Mount Etna is currently having a major eruption, and the amount of CO2 that it's putting up into the atmosphere is going to be massively more than most. Is it not? No.
Nope, nope,
Right. Explain.
nope.
Go
If you
ahead.
look at that, that's a fallacy that's been promoted, and we just can't kill it. If you look at Mount Pinatubo, there's a story going around that's been published by a noted geologist that when Mount Pinatubo erupted in 1991, it put out more CO2 in that one eruption than man's entire
Mhm,
history. Well, that's just categorically false. We have a pretty good idea of how much CO2 was emitted by Pinatubo. We also have a very good idea of how much carbon dioxide emissions by man were released. And we look at that,
mhm.
and Mount Pinatubo put up 0.2% of all the carbon uh, from our emissions. Did it put that's still a lot of CO2 in that one eruption, but bear in mind when it went, it was for a couple of days
Yeah.
and then it was over. Um, so no, CO volcanoes compared to what we're emitting are very, very small.
So okay, so what you're saying is, Gregory, based on your research and understanding, it is mankind. So it is anthropogenic then, in
Yeah,
terms of warming.
I'm okay with that because it's good. I'm okay with more
Yeah,
CO2. We
yeah,
it's if it's beneficial, and it is, and we can prove that it's just it is. It's really good, and it's doing great things for particularly agriculture,
yeah,
and it's certainly not any danger. 'Cause
yeah,
OSHA doesn't put up a danger until you get well over, I believe it's 6 or 8,000 parts per million. Definitely 5,000, which is 10 or
yeah.
15 times what it is
We're,
today. We'll never get there.
you will no, no, well, we don't. But what will happen, Gregory, in your opinion, if the green lobby does make some strides towards reducing our CO2 by moving us into this net zero environment? What do you think that impact will have on the climate? What will that do, if anything?
Well, it could only be negative. If CO2 is a benefit and they're reducing it, then
Mm,
they're reducing a beneficial molecule that could be used for plant growth.
mm,
And also, we've just talked about to get there is environmentally destructive.
yeah.
Their solutions are bad for the environment, are they not? They are. And so we need to fight this. We need what we need to do is not censor and silence people. And that's what they are doing.
Yeah.
If I could get this information to the people, when I talk to just random people are thirsty for this information. Their eyes get wide and they go, "What?"
Mhm.
I'm gonna tell you a story. I was in London last November, I believe it was February, and I was on a train bound from London to Oxford, and I was on. There was a fellow there uh, from Ghana, and he was being given a award by the UN, honor for his life's career for sustainable building development. And I sat there, and I had my new book with me, and we started talking. And his eyes got wide. He says, I've never heard this. Why have I never been told this? And I
Yeah.
said, well, this is the data. This is the source. And he says, this is, everyone should know this. And he was angry because this information's been well hidden, and it's
Yeah.
really important information. And again, that's our job here at the CO2 Coalition is to get that. And you can, if you're interested, our website is co2coalition.org,
Yeah.
co2coalition.org.
Let's bring her
We have
up.
great information on that.
There we
Um,
go. Yeah, on screen. There you go.
and
I mean, yep. Because Gregory, it is the gas of life. I mean, as you say, it's a molecule of life, and yet they've done such a job on demonizing it. It's unbelievable. You know, young kids at school are taught that this is the greatest evil ever.
yeah,
CO2. Nothing could be further from the truth.
no, it's not. And
Mhm.
we've also got an education initiative. I'm really proud of what we've done there. We were scared, frightened, terrorized that our children were being indoctrinated into this climate cult. They were being taught consensus and groupthink,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
consensus science, and they weren't being taught the scientific method or critical thinking skills. And so we've launched this. Again, it's at co2learningcenter.com. co2learningcenter.com is the website. We've got books I've hired a Brazilian artist who does the books manga style. Importantly, in the
Okay. Yeah.
United States, we have a huge homeschooling movement. All of my grandchildren are homeschooled. And so we provide lesson plans, detailed scientific lesson plans for homeschooling parents. Even
Hmm.
some of the public schools are picking up on this.
Hmm.
And you'll see there in one of the uh, we videos too, and it was kind of funny. I was the voice of Mr. Fish, and when they got the video together, they put a silver mustache on Mr. Fish. And so,
Hang on, volume
it was
down.
pretty funny. They have a lot of fun with this, but
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
really proud to be able to educate our children.
And you know, Gregory, I think that's admirable because it's the children that they're the keenest to propagandize. Because if they get them, then that's essentially the future, you know. So I
Yeah.
think it's really good that we do counter and actually and for kids in a child appropriate manner, and then for adults. It's about critical thinking. I mean, if there's one thing I've learned over the past 4 years since 2020, it's the fact that critical thinking is the essential skill that we have that protects us from big government propaganda in whatever area you want to talk about, you know. So I think encouraging people to think critically. So there are a couple of, as you say, you got your new book. I just want to sort of bring up the books again, folks, for everyone watching this. So Gregory's most recent book, a very convenient warming. I love the titles. How modest warming and more CO2 are benefiting humanity. Essential read. Please go check that one out. And then Gregory's previous book, Inconvenient Facts, essentially the counter to Al Gore's science. Do you know, I remember, Gregory, years ago, the BBC here in the UK paid me to go and watch Gore's move. They actually paid me to go and watch it. And yeah, it was laughable. I mean, I come back and told them what I
I hope
thought.
they paid you a lot.
Not enough, not enough. No money would pay. It lasted for. It seemed to go last forever. It was so, but it was so much propaganda, you know, and so much of it is. And I think we have to fight back, Gregory, against the propaganda coming from the sort of big environmental
Well,
movement.
that's what we're doing. And
Yeah,
that first book, Inconvenient Facts, I just authorized. It's the 10th printing of that book. That book has been so popular, and it's very readable. It's for non-scientists, full
yeah.
of graphics. It's the 10th printing, and it's been just incredible. It continues to outsell by a lot my newest book that was just published, which is
Mhm.
unusual.
Well,
But
give it time, Greg.
yeah,
Give a very convenient warming time. I think countering the narrative is very important, and that's essentially what what you've been doing, what the CO2 coalition has been doing, and you know, I want to thank you for all the work you've put in to doing it, because as I say, you are speaking to the choir, preaching to the choir here. We see it the same, but to be honest, we need more voices like you, because there's so many on the other side, so if we can help in our small way of getting this out across all different platforms to different folks, so they might decide to. I know you can check Gregory, you're on X. I can see. I do follow you on X now, Gregory. So you'll see me as a new follower. You can get more
Follow the CO2 Coalition too.
and CO2 Coalition. Yes,
Posting mainly on there.
yeah, and and this is how we have to do it, Gregory. We all have to kind of work together to get really important information out. I found that people are very receptive to facts. People like facts, and that's what you've been providing people with. So, Gregory, listen, thank you so much for spending the past hour with us and our viewers and listeners, because this goes out as a podcast as well. So, yeah, so as I say, absolutely keep on doing the great work, Gregory. And if you're ever back in the UK, do look me up. Be very happy to shoot the breeze with you. When
I will be there in February for the art conference.
Oh, very good. The art conference. Excellent. Okay. Well, hopefully the UK will still be here by then. At the moment, I'm not 100% certain, but all things being equal, we'll still be here. I want to thank you, Gregory. I want to thank everybody on all the different streams for tuning in, for listening, watching, downloading, whatever. And I will be back with you guys later in the week. But from Gregory and myself, it's good night.